8 years ago, when I landed my first job straight out of grad school, the very first thing that I did, within 2 days of graduating nonetheless, was to buy a luxury car. I should clarify, I took out $60,000 in loans on top of the $40,000 in loans that I had already taken out to pay for my grad school tuition, just to be able to drive said car around. I spent 100% of my post-tax starting salary on a new car when I already had a 10-year-old Toyota that was working perfectly fine. I was willing to go $100,000 into debt just to be able to drive around this car. And the funny thing is, I didn't even second guess myself once. I felt perfectly justified. It felt like this is what I was supposed to be doing. I had graduated, I got my job, I was making it in the world. It's crazy. Unfortunately, my story is just not unique. The median income for a luxury car owner in America is $99,000. When you consider that the average cost of a luxury car is around $75,000, that means half of all luxury car owners are spending between 75 to 100% of their annual income on a car. This is nuts. What's even more wild is that study after study proves that material items like expensive cars don't make us happier. So what's going on here? Why are humans time and time again killing ourselves financially just to drive around these cars that virtually have no higher utility than the non-name brand cheaper cars and also have no long-term lasting impact on our happiness? Today is the first in what I hope will be a multi-part series that I like to call The Psychology of Why You're Broke. I love nerding out on science and psych theory, and so my goal with this series is to use science to break down exactly why we make certain financial decisions. Because I know the data shows that the first step to making lasting change is understanding the motivation behind our behavior. I could sit here and give you a long list of reasons about why you shouldn't buy that luxury car. I could show you the data about how it won't bring you lasting happiness. I could run the numbers for you and show you exactly how that purchase would kill your bank account and your early retirement dreams. I could do all of that, and you still might sit there and be longing for that Porsche. So today, instead of giving you that long list of reasons about why you shouldn't buy that luxury car, I want to use science and psych theory to break down why you even want that car in the first place. And look, I know that some of the topics we'll bring up today are not necessarily the most comfortable to talk about. It's natural as humans to want to just ignore certain truths about ourselves, especially if they're things that don't always put us in the best light. But I can tell you, by understanding and applying these theories to my own life, that's the reason why I can sit here today and honestly tell you that I am obsessed with driving my Kia Forte. I just love it, which is crazy to me because I was always that kid that would dream of driving that sports car convertible. I remember being in elementary school and getting together with my girlfriends, and we'd all figure out, okay, which boy in the class will we marry? Where will we live in our big fancy mansion? And what kind of luxury car are we going to be driving around? 10-year-old Elise would never have pictured 32-year-old Elise being stoked to drive around and roll up places in a Kia, yet here we are. So let's start breaking down this science. One of the most important theories of human behavior hinges on evolutionary psychology. The idea is that almost every common human behavior has been selected for because generations ago it was essential to keeping humans alive. Importantly, the need to belong is actually an adaptive mechanism that was critical to human survival. Back in the caveman days, if you couldn't figure out how to fit in with the clan, you died. It's pretty incredible when you think about it that if you're here today, it's probably because your ancestors were really good at figuring out how to belong to the group. So that means that we're all born with this innate desire to want to belong and be accepted by other people. And if you have kids or you've taken care of babies, you have living proof of this. One of the very first things that babies do when they learn that, oh, I can move my hands and I can make noises, they start mimicking their parents and their caretakers. The first thing that a toddler will do when you take them out to the playground for the first time is they'll look around and they'll figure out, okay, what is everybody else doing? And then they'll go and do that same thing. So this wiring of our brain that we're born with, it's actually pretty beautiful and amazing if you think about it. The problem is that in our current modern day society, it's just become pretty maladaptive. These days, if you don't fit in perfectly, it's not like you're going to be thrown to the bear as food or left in the desert to die. And yet, even though we logically know that, okay, our survival does not hinge upon driving around this luxury car, we still do it, right? We still buy that car. So this brings us to the second theory, which is the theory of social self-representation. So this is basically the idea that our need to belong is fulfilled by representing ourselves as a person of worth to our society. If we can demonstrate we're valuable to the group, we're accepted by the group, right? So, okay, we're wired to want to belong. One easy way to cement that belonging is by proving our worth to society. But what do we do? How do we show our worth to society in the modern era where we just don't have time to figure out, okay, what is every single person offering to the world, to this group? You know, I can't just go to the grocery store and chit chat with every single person I pass by and ask them, well, tell me about your unique types of intelligence and let me tell you about mine. You know, it's just not that realistic, right? So what we rely on is one of the easiest things we can do. We can just buy these superficial materialistic things like luxury cars that will be this outward signal, this virtuous thing telling society, yes, I'm a person of worth, I'm valuable to society. And why do we think that materialistic items like luxury cars will be our ticket to success, happiness, and belonging? Because we've been bombarded with images reinforcing this idea our entire lives. Celebrities are basically the humans of our society that we perceive as having the highest level of acceptance and belonging. And we're reminded of that every day by the millions and millions of followers they have on social media. And what do celebrities do once they've made it in the world? They buy luxury car after luxury car, and our computer and phone screens are blasted with these images day after day. And marketing companies aren't stupid. They understand this biological need of humans to belong, and they target us because they know the way that we've learned to belong from the time we were babies is by mimicking. Why do you think that influencer culture exists? Because companies know that if we see a person with millions of followers doing something or using a product, we'll think that if we do the same thing, we'll be accepted into their group. Take BMW, for example. They recently got Gigi Hadid, a supermodel with over 77 million followers, to do a campaign. And then they gave her a car to drive around, knowing that if a lot of us saw that, we'd be triggered into wanting to get that car so we could feel in some way that we belong to this successful, attractive, worthy group of individuals that somebody like Gigi Hadid symbolizes. It's just this endless feedback loop of positive reinforcement for our behaviors. We want to be accepted, so we try to buy something to make us look like we're worthy of acceptance. That leads us to getting praise and positive feedback. Now we've crafted this whole great identity for ourselves based on this specific form of acceptance of our worth. Now we continue to engage in these behaviors because our whole identity is wrapped up in it. So the cycle just keeps going and keeps continuing. I can tell you firsthand that this really does happen. When I was driving around our really nice car, I cannot tell you how many times I would just drive up to some random store and the amount of comments and stares and people coming up to you and talking to you about your car, it's ridiculous. But of course, it starts to get to your head, right? You start feeling like, oh yeah, this car is really great. I'm really great for driving this car. I've worked really hard for this. I deserve this. This is who I am. If it wasn't that society just continued to reinforce these types of behaviors, I think we'd start to try to seek validation and belonging somewhere else, right? But it's so hard to just reject something that seems like upfront a pretty simple way to get that validation, to fill that need to belong. And what's interesting here is that our early life experiences can drastically impact our sense of fulfillment of this critical need. So if we don't get this early on, it can leave us in a perpetual state of searching to fill that void into adulthood. So if you're someone who experienced and felt a lot of rejection as a child, it's possible that you might fall somewhere on the top right of this graph. And that makes sense because your whole life you've been searching for that sense of belonging. And here's society telling you that things like luxury cars are the way to fill that need. And I can speak from a little bit of experience here. So I was someone who was bullied as a kid. I didn't have a ton of friends. I never felt like I totally fit in with any one group. And so I think from a very young age and for many years, at a really critical time in my life when I was forming my identity, that need wasn't getting satisfied. And I think that's something that I carried with me. And looking back at it now that I'm starting to understand all of this, I can see how a lot of the decisions that I made, a lot of them financial, were all kind of guided and trying to fill this void that I felt like was missing for so long. When I bought that luxury car, I was just out of grad school. That was a time in my life where I think I was really just trying to solidify my identity. And I think subconsciously, I wanted to feel like, okay, I do belong to this successful group of hardworking people. I didn't second guess myself because that just seemed like what this group was doing. That purchase was kind of my way of saying, I've quote unquote made it. But if I'm really being honest here, I think that purchase was largely driven by those early life experiences I was telling you about, where I did feel that sense of rejection and that missing sense of belonging from such a young age. And I think I was still carrying that with me. And so by making that luxury car purchase, in a way, it was kind of like my way of saying to those people that had rejected me, like, hey, you were wrong about me. I do belong. I am worthy. Okay, so not the greatest thing to be like, broadcasting to the world, right? It's kind of an unattractive truth about oneself to be sharing that. But I genuinely think that I'm not alone here. And honestly, the second I was able to be truthful with myself about that, that was the first step in letting that part of me go. So what do we do about all of this? Do we just say, oh, well, I'm just born this way and my early life experiences made me this way and it is what it is? Absolutely not. We have to break this cycle. And I think that the very first and most important thing to do is finding and building communities that don't signify our sense of belonging through materialistic things. I think we're always going to be communally oriented, right? Like we learned from evolutionary psychology. We're kind of wired to want to belong to the group. But instead of attaching to the mainstream society that tells us we want and need these superficial things, we need to find other groups that don't really care about the materialistic things, that prioritize and value other things in life to make us happy. Adam and I have found that both the f.i.r.e. community and the outdoors community really don't care that much about superficial things. We felt really encouraged with both of these groups to figure out, okay, what is it in our lives that'll make us as individuals truly happy? And those groups just all encourage each other to go out and do that thing. And that's pretty much our whole goal with this Renegade retirement channel. We want this to be a community where we can all just come together and encourage each other to figure out what it is that we each individually want, rather than just wanting what society tells us we should want. And look, I am not saying in any way that we need to completely renounce like all materialistic goods or anything. We do not need to go live on a commune together, okay? That would be far too drastic. One thing that I have found really helpful in starting this process is by asking myself one important question before I make any decision. And that question is, would I still buy this thing if I knew that there would be no one else in the world that would know that I had this thing? Would I still buy that $100,000 Porsche if I was guaranteed that not a single human would ever know that I had that car? When I was honest with myself about that question, my answer was no way. Adam used to joke with me that I would have been just as happy driving around the shell of a Porsche and having a Toyota engine inside versus driving around the actual Porsche with the actual engine. It was true. And that tells you a lot. That tells you I was just using this luxury car to signal something about myself. It's taking small steps like that that slowly allows us to be able to just detach our sense of self from the other. Obviously, the pie in the sky goal here would be if we could all just completely detach our sense of self from caring about what anybody in the world thinks of us. But let's be honest. I mean, Buddhist monks will work their entire lives to reach that sense of enlightenment. I don't think it's realistic. I also don't really think it's necessary. I think it's just about being a little bit more cognizant of our motivations behind why we're doing certain things, so that little by little, we can get to the point where we truly believe that our happiness does not rely on rolling up to the grocery store in that Ferrari, right? Anyway, I had a lot of fun diving into this. I am going to be so curious to hear what you guys think about all of this. If any of you have any other topics or ideas for this series, let me know, and I'll see you guys next time.